Hello everybody, hope you're having a good day, and today we're going to be doing some questions and answers. So we run one of these roughly every week. If you guys have got any questions of your own, you can just drop them down in the comments. That's usually where I look. Please don't mail me in-game. I got a ton of mails in-game since I've started streaming, where people will mail me asking questions expecting them to appear here, and that just doesn't happen because my mail fills up and I need to keep it clear, and I get spam suppressed when I try and respond to people. It's pretty horrible. So if you do, as we have any discussion as we go along here, have anything to add on, it'll be really cool to see what you guys have to say, and we'll answer some questions too. Specifically, a couple of topics that caught my eye from last episode. We were talking about the possibility of 500 crafting for cooking and for jewel crafting, and then we specifically talked about the idea of gathering professions for masteries. I don't know whether I mentioned this on that episode, but first of all, on the gathering topic, we actually already see that's a thing. The New Hawk Law, by going higher on the mastery check there, you will find you gain the ability to gather mushrooms you otherwise couldn't. That is pretty much exactly, except, the simplicity of pressing F rather than holding a fishing rod and doing cool stuff like that. It's pretty much exactly demonstrating how they can use masteries for interesting gathering tracks. Straight away. So that was something that I didn't mention, I'm pretty sure. Also, we've got the Genolite ingots. I was talking about how these could be used to craft ascended trinkets like rings and things. Some people weren't so excited by this anymore because obviously there's a lot of ways to get many of the stat sets we like. My argument was that a lot of these stat sets are incomplete. Specifically, when you look at the rings, they're weird combinations of stats. And it would be kind of nice to have 500 jewel crafting allow you to make those weird combinations of stats and then get like the full set instead of just two rings that are one type, and then, there's no back piece that exists and there's only similar stuff for some of the other slots and so on. But actually, someone brought something else to my attention, and this is the idea of ascended bags. I don't know really whether ascended bags fit perfectly into jewel crafting, unless they're all supposed to be like heavily jewel adorned bags. But this is actually a fantastic idea. I really like this one. And I thought one thing Guild Wars 2 did really well at launch straight away was they had a lot of interesting types of bags. You have the crafting bags, and you had the invisible bags, and you had like one for each armor class. And there was that real nice, fun community spirit back around launch where those early crafters were giving, guild mates and friends that came into the game bags. I, on the stream the other day, looked at a 2-year-old mail I had from my original Guild Wars 2 Let's Play, and some kind viewer had sent me a 10-slot bag. People were excited back then. Bags are kind of a non-thing now. Most of us have got our 20-slot bags, and honestly, it's so much easier to get them now. The price for them, isn't the same. I've been hearing about a method using candy corn where you can just get Halloween pails really easily. So I'd like to see that come back a bit, and there's cool stuff they can do with like ascended bags or exotic bags, add the tiers of rarity on there. Yeah, they can have more stuff. 25 is fine. I think people really appreciate an inventory bump like that. But then you've got the ideas as well of stuff like account bags. And as long as you have an account bag on every character, every time you craft that account bag and you put it in someone else's inventory, it has the same inventory across all your characters. And what this means is you can fill that account bag that's got 25 slots with all your food and your common consumables and stuff that you use across multiple characters, even stat sets you could have waiting around for you. And they would stay in that account bag. I think that's a really fantastic idea, and I'd like to see more of that. So, one final thing from the conversation before was we were talking about the idea of undodgeable stuff. We're talking about raid design, talking about how powerful hard mitigation is at the moment, and specifically, how strong it is to just dodge roll against a wall to avoid many big tells. I was specifically mentioning that I think more frequent lower packets of damage might be more interesting than just these big one-shots that constantly come around, though I have no doubt we'll see a mix of both. And we talked about the idea of undodgeable abilities, and maybe even mixing those into elite specializations. I gave a couple of examples, and actually a really big one very recently has been the Daredevil, the most recent elite specialization. They have this thing called the Pulmonary Impact, which is a debuff that goes on a foe, and then counts down after 3 seconds, it pops, and it can never crit, but it does a flat high amount of damage that is completely unavoidable. You cannot block it or, importantly, dodge roll it, and that was confirmed too, so people talked about that. But yeah, so that's just a little bit from the previous Q&A. Let's move on to the next one. This is the first question from Habana, who says, "Hey, WP. Lately, I've been thinking about what could be new runes that they're going to bring out, and I was looking at all of them. So my idea is, why not make rune sets based on weapons? Is this something they would consider, or they're planning to? What's your opinion about it? I'm really curious. Have a good one." So this is, at first, an exciting thought. It's kind of like you'd have a rune set, and it says your scepter skills recharge 10% faster. Don't make it 20% faster because Design-wise, I think traits are supposed to be more effective or prominent than runes. I'm really not sure how ArenaNet balance that or what they think the sweet spot is. But so, you know, you'd have some arbitrary number like that, and it affects your scepter skills. And now you've got a rune set that multiple professions can use. Not every build ever is going to use it, but multiple professions will. So kind of the dream scenario is right now, it's really obvious. If you want to go pure glass cannon, let's pretend everything's going to go perfectly. What's the most damage I can do? It's a really simple decision for you. In 99% of cases, a very simple decision. You go Scholar. You go Scholar, and then you just make sure you're in a good enough group and pretend like you're getting that bonus on the 90%. Well, the cool idea with this is Scholar instead become runes that, you know, you deal 10%, you get all these flat buffs or whatever, but the ferocity bonus, maybe the 10% stacking bonus at the end, is while wielding a greatsword, you get this. Or while wielding a shield, you get plus 20% more damage or health, or something like that. And what it means now is if many of the runes adhere to that, depending on the class you're playing and depending on the build and the weapons you're running, you want different runes too. But I do think there are some problems. I like the idea that it wouldn't become so simple and you'd see a wider variety of runes. You could add, you know, stuff like this onto some of the underused runes in the game right now. But it's difficult because, like, take the example of a scepter, all right? What do you put as the perk on the scepter? Cooldowns works. It's not very flavorful, but it kind of works because everyone, regardless of the build they're running, can get that benefit. But let's try and go something a little bit more interesting, all right? Your scepter abilities now apply bleeds. Now, I would presume a couple of thousand of you listening right now would have thought to yourselves, yeah, that's really cool. And why? Because you main Necromance and you think, yeah, that's a cool Condi weapon. But then a lot of other people, mainly Elementalists, I would say, you know, Burn Guardians can run Scepter, so, you know, maybe they appreciate some bleeds. They're thinking, oh, a couple of bleeds, that's really not going to help my build. That sounds boring and lame as hell. And so there you see that even though it's the same weapon, it doesn't mean that it fills the same role as you translate across classes. And it's not just whether it's ranged or melee damage. Think about a greatsword on a warrior versus a greatsword on a mesmer. But these changes happen everywhere, and that's to make the classes feel distinct. And that's a good thing in my opinion. So when you add these runes, maybe this is why they haven't played into that so much. But it's a fun idea. And definitely, I've mentioned it a lot recently, I would like to do a video at some point talking about the possibilities the rune and sigil system could offer the game if they just revamped a few things. Next one's from Jared Strife. It's a cool little question. Something about the beta that I really haven't discussed on the channel yet. So, do you think that the point of interest in Verdant Brink, the one called the Corpse Grove, was once a pale tree that's now withered and corrupted by Morgemoth's influence? So, the Corpse Grove, let's talk about this. At the release of Guild Wars 2, we had the Grove, we had the Pale Tree, and we never heard any word of any other trees, but there were vague theories that there could perhaps be a tree in the Echo Veld Forest, because there are Thorn Wolves there, because there were Wardens there, and that's what the Sylvari here call themselves. But more specifically, there was a level 20 story for Sylvari who choose where life goes, so too shall you, and you meet a Sylvari from a different Pale Tree. And it would seem that this character, Malik, floated down a stream from somewhere deeper in the Maguma jungle that we don't know about, and he wants to go home. So that story arc ends with Malik saying, right, I don't want to fall to Nightmare like the Nightmare Core. I want to fight the dragons. I really want to. I'm going to go home. I'm going to find my tree. I'm going to build an army, and I'll see you again one day. And that mission, that last quest, it loads up so often. I'll see you again. I'll see you again. I'll see you again someday. Maybe we'll see you again someday. ArenaNet obviously hinting. And so a lot of people for many, many years now, 3 years, have thought, okay, eventually we'll go deeper into the Maguma jungle and we'll find this other pale tree. We'll find Malik and his army. Will they have been corrupted by Morgemoth? We don't know, but this is something we're all really hoping for. This does mean that at the launch of Guild Wars 2, there was already confirmation that there were other pale trees. We just had never really seen one. This beta already shows us in Verdant Brink a giant tree called the Corpse Grove. And so it's kind of unclear. Now, there's an event here where the members of the Pact who were on the Quagana airship crash. They're being assaulted by a Morgem that keeps coming back to life, a corrupted old Sylvari friend of theirs called Diarmid, and, that's perhaps references to the Green Knight storyline for Sylvari characters too, in which one of the famed Sylvari armorsmiths creates a set of armor that allows basically someone to come back to life continuously, and it seems Diarmid's got something similar going on there. But these characters, they're trying to rebuild their airship, and they realize there's this horrible, dangerous tree nearby, the Corpse Grove, and they want to go there and stop the Morgem from spawning out of it. And you have these events where you arrive there and you've got like these spawning pods that maybe don't look too unlike the spawning pods where Sylvari are born from, that you can see at the very start of, you know, when you make a new Sylvari character and you leave that tutorial instance, and you kind of blow these up, you retract it, and the corpse grove is, you know, sent into recession. The characters leave, and then, you know, night falls and everything starts again. So the question is, first of all, is this a full-on pale tree? I believe it probably is. I believe, though, that unlike a pale tree born from like one of the seeds that Ronan found in this cave, I believe it's probably not associated with that. It's probably just something that Morgemoth now has just sort of created. It is functionally very different to our grove, but then we don't really know how the pale tree looked when it was originally flowering and it originally dropped the Sylvari. The luminary of the cycle of dusk? Pretty sure it's dusk. One of these firstborn, Kahedins, I believe it is, talks about how he shaped the grove, and, you know, it looked one way and then eventually shaped it into the grove we see today. So what would it look like in its natural state if no one did it? Would it look something like the corpse grove we see here? Perhaps. Either way, the question would then be in the air, is this where Malik came from? I think instinctually a lot of us are going to think, no, that can't be where Malik was from. What, they're just going to throw the, you know, one of these huge mysteries we've been looking for? One of my top 10 predictions, guys, for Season 2's conclusion of The Living World, if you rewind the clock a year ago now to a video I did, one of my top predictions was that Season 2 of The Living World would end climactically at this second pale tree. It never did in the end. We're waiting for it in Heart of Thorns, and how offensive would it be for this location to just turn out to be it? You know, and there's no sign of any Sylvari there or Malik or anything like that. So I think that's our first inclination, but I will entertain the thought a little further because, frankly, we don't know what personal story happens around there. There could easily be a personal story instance in that general region of the world, and when we go in it, maybe we do see the corpse grove, you know, except set a few hours before the events of what we see in Verdant Brink, and at that point, it's maybe got a lot more activity there. Maybe we do meet Malik there. Maybe it's got tons of Sylvari. I hope that Malik's pale tree is not this. It's not the corpse grove. I'm hoping it's something else. But I do believe this is basically another grove, another pale tree. And it's just for spawning Morgemoth's minions. Pretty exciting stuff. Next one's from the kill box. I'll try and go a bit quicker here, guys. Would you be willing to play a couple of hours of World of Warcraft? I feel like if you got together with a big World of Warcraft YouTube channel, they could guide you through the first, 2 hours. Then you could do the same with Guild Wars 2. I can't help but feel like there's a lot of animosity between the two games, and it would be very entertaining to see someone tie these together in one series. I don't really have anything against World of Warcraft. I played it back in 2006 or something. I played a Tauren to level 8 while I was at a friend's house. And that's pretty much my experience. The rest of my experience with that game is through my younger brother, who still actively plays and talks about various things. It seems like a cool game. I understand why people get addicted to it. And, some of the philosophy and design there kind of does excite me a lot that we definitely don't see in Guild Wars 2 because Guild Wars 2 is such a different game. I find it curious. The main reason I'm picking this question isn't because I'm going to do a couple of hours stream of World of Warcraft or something. But it's a weird notion to me that these games these days have a lot of animosity between them. Where does that animosity come from? I actually don't see much at all. And I think my opinion does hold some weight because I am, exposed to our community on a daily basis. I get hundreds of comments on a daily basis from Guild Wars 2 players and that World of Warcraft players that also happen to play Guild Wars 2. There's not that much animosity. I think people at this point, they appreciate their different games. And World of Warcraft's been the top dog for how many years now? It's not like they're threatened by Guild Wars 2. It's not like Guild Wars 2 is on the block and the new kid on the block now that has got all these stupid kids running around saying, oh, it's going to kill WoW, it's going to kill WoW. We just don't see that, They're different games, they have different philosophies, and I don't really see much animosity. I will also mention, though, on the topic of other MMOs, just to tack this onto this question, I will probably, on the Visualwood podcast, since it's going free to play, try out some WildStar, because I never did before. I heard that it flopped badly. I'm not expecting to like it a crazy amount, but it'll be a pretty fun stream. Moving on, we got Happy Land, who says, very simply, when is Super Adventure Box coming back? I don't really have too much more to say on this. This could sound on one level as like a very boring question. We don't know. They haven't announced, right? That's the true answer. But there is something more that I do want to bring to you guys' attention. And this is, seriously, when are they bringing it back in terms of what is their roadmap for the future? So why didn't we see Super Adventure Box, the third release, World 3, why didn't we see that come out, half a year or so after Super Adventure Box 2 back to school? Why didn't they do that? Well, they didn't do that because they had finally got a grasp on how they wanted to tell the narrative of the game, and they had Living World going on, Living World Season 2, and they didn't want, unlike in Season 1, where it was like, oh, here's a random thing this week, here's a random thing this week, here's a random thing this week, which is entirely what Season 1 was. Instead of that, they wanted to have really focused updates that chain back to back on one another and sort of build a narrative. In the end, because there was like a 2-week break or then like huge breaks between in the middle of the seasons, I don't really think that it matters if they do like a filler update at some point in the middle of a Living World season. That's my personal opinion. But ArenaNet didn't give us Super Adventure Box. This is the important part, because they had Season 2 of the Living World. And because they'd finally settled on what they wanted to do, like in terms of releasing those updates. So why is that ever going to change? Like, really, here's their roadmap, and it works wonderfully. Let me just say, it sounds like we're going to get something like this. You get an expansion release, so we'll start with Hearththorns, right? How easy would it be for ArenaNet to do this, right? For the PvE side of the game. Expansion release, or just the entire game, let's go that far. PvE expansion releases. Then we get a couple of updates over the next few weeks, rolling out a couple of raid wings. And then a couple of months after the raid wings are out and the raid is complete, we get a Living World season. Once the Living World season ends, and this can be going on at the same time as, say, a proper World versus World tournament, as obviously the leagues are resetting over in PvP. After the Living World season, we go back and we get another raid that's associated with like the new map that they've just added. They had a couple of wings. This is in the downtime between the seasons, right? We get that raid come into the game. Then they go into the next season. We're on to Living World Season 4. They do the same thing. It gets capped off with a raid. And the story at that point, you know, leading off of those next 2 seasons, we're probably 2 years after Hearththorns at this point, they reveal the next expansion. You get the expansion and so on, right? Ad infinitum. That works really well. I think that'll keep people very happy. But where does it leave them in terms of fillery updates and interesting playful updates? And specifically, all right, Super Adventure Box. Do they try again to weirdly tie Super Adventure Box into the core Living World story so that we can actually have an excuse to go to it? Or do they just accept the fact that people want to run around in there again at some point? Where is the space for it? They've still got a lot of projects going on. They've got Season 1 of Living World to implement at some point. You know, so what I just said isn't even the full picture. It's maybe Living World Season 3 ends, we take a break for some raid stuff, and then it's not Living World Season 4, it's actually Season 1 gets dropped in the game at that point, and then we go forward. But there's just so much on the table that, you know, I feel like Super Adventure Box is really very much on the floor, even though we know that there's ideas for it. Moving on, Daniel Burbridge says, Wooden Potatoes jumping on the question wagon late. If GW2 was the first Guild Wars game you were introduced to within the franchise, do you think you'd still be playing? That's a great question. And do you know what the answer is? The answer is probably not. Probably not. Look, if I didn't play GW1, I didn't get addicted to GW1. I didn't get addicted to MMOs. I didn't try any other MMOs because I wasn't going to pay a sub fee for other MMOs. I played console stuff. Those days where I really got super into console and first-person shooters, I'd probably be like some kind of bro gamer, Call of Duty dude that in the end never really has that much appreciation for narrative or story in games. And I probably just would have stayed there. And then, do you know what? I wouldn't have started my YouTube channel, and you know, I would have ended up going off getting a real job, and then gaming for me would have just become this very small part of my life. I don't think I'd be playing Guild Wars 2. Not at all. And if you want to look at it on like a game level, even let's assume there's that version of me out there, and you know, someone somehow convinces me to sit down and play Guild Wars 2, right? Even though it was never going to come my way. Even in that situation, because I hadn't played the first game, I wouldn't have known about the wealth of lore and backstory that everything was seated on, and I would have been incredibly turned off by the personal story and how ArenaNet handled stuff. I would have got bored when I got to end game. I wouldn't have known what to do. I probably wouldn't have formed, you know, a guild or anything. I wouldn't have gone into the game with an established friend group, which I did, and then I probably would have quit, and I wouldn't have been looking back for the expansion or anything like that. I seriously doubt it. Interesting question though. Moving on, we got Rendesh says, Hey WP, what's my least favourite Guild Wars 2 map? Very basic answer to this. It is the most mainstream answer out there. You guys know what it is. It's Dredgehaunt Cliffs. Alright, if you're not nodding along right now because you yourself feel the exact same, you are crazy. Dredgehaunt is like a terrible map on many levels. I say it's a terrible map, and I mean it's a terrible map in comparison to the other maps that already also exist in Guild Wars 2. In comparison to those maps, but in general, it's a Guild Wars 2 map. It uses Guild Wars 2's combat. It's the game Guild Wars 2, so it's actually fairly entertaining and enjoying for me. Even that map I quite like. I wouldn't say I hate the map, but in comparison to all the other ones, I don't like it. You know, it's in kind of another generic-y, Shiver Peaks-y area. Yes, it has a good jumping puzzle or mini dungeon in it, and I really like the look of some of the skies in the northern sections, but mostly, speaking aesthetics, I don't enjoy it very much. In terms of enemy design, we're just talking about Dredge, constantly Dredge, and some Sons of Svanir. Boring as all hell. In terms of event design, you know, it's got a world boss there, but it's just one random event and something that could have been a much better meta. So yeah, that's the bad map. It does have some shining gems. It's got the Granite Citadel there, for God's sake, and that's an incredible heart. That's one of my favourite hearts to play in the whole game. But just generally thinking about that map, it's... look at the world map, guys. What is honestly worse than Dredge Hunt? None of them, in my opinion. So next we got a couple of questions from Tony Vega. I didn't answer them all, but here's a couple. First of all, glasses or contacts? I wear glasses. I've never worn contacts in my life. For a good period of my life, when I was a kid, I wore glasses, and then I was told I didn't need them anymore, and then when I was learning to drive, I realized again I needed to wear glasses, and then for the past, 5 years or so, maybe a little bit less, I've been wearing glasses again. I haven't looked at contacts. The next question is, how do I think I would do, and I love this question, okay, in a Guild Wars 2 trivia game? Do I think I am one of the most knowledgeable players in the game, and would I accept challenges? In terms of, being a specialist in one area, people are going to think of me, Wood and Potatoes, as the lore specialist. But in actuality, there's a lot of little bits of lore that I don't know and slip out of my head, sincerely, very quickly. And that then warps my perspective on the theories I create and stuff. So, for example, here's the next question the same person asked was, do you think you'll ever reach a point where I've talked about every single piece of lore in the game? No! The stream that I run now, in the morning, we before the stream and after the stream, we watched some of the Prophecies gameplay that I did 4 or 5 years ago now. And I watched myself in that game talking to NPCs, and they say stuff that I've completely forgotten about. There's a dwarf in Icetooth Cave who mentions the human god Balthazar. The dwarves don't really believe in the human gods. So if I hadn't watched that, right, and someone had asked me on this episode of the Q&A, hey, did the dwarves, before they went extinct, believe in the human gods? My answer, 100%, I promise you, my answer would have been, no, they didn't care about the human gods. They didn't even know anything about them. They believed in the Great Dwarf. And then I would have talked to you about the Great Dwarf. But I would have been wrong. There's this weird obscure on one little NPC here, and I'm sure in many other places, where one of them mentions Balthazar, at least, so we know that they had knowledge of them. And, it is so extensive and vast and massive, and I only have so much retention of knowledge that I'm in kind of a weird spot. So you ask me, how would I do in a Guild Wars 2 trivia game? There are people out there who would be able to recall from rote memory, Guild Wars 2 lore far better than I can. So, I wouldn't win hands down on that. But interestingly enough, I think if you just did a really random trivia game with very specific questions, I actually think it'd be really fun to design this trivia game for what it's worth, with really specific questions, that branch from stuff like, oh, hey, what is the name of the human nature god? Kind of easy, to completely alternate questions like, hey, what PvP teams participated in the 2008 Cologne GVG tournament for Guild Wars 1? And, there's someone out there who could answer both of those questions, but suddenly we're talking a lot narrower. And because I've been with the franchise for so long, I know there's a crazy amount of very disparate questions that could be asked. I think it'd be really fun. You'd have to tier it easy questions, medium questions, and then hard questions. And just see who generally knows the most. I'd love to run a show where I put the devs through those trivia quizzes as well. That would be incredible. And lastly, we've been talking for so long, so I will just run through this very fast. Paradigm Fang says, after playing the most recent beta experience, do I feel that mastery points are too easily achieved, tuned just right, or take too long to achieve? I absolutely believe they are far too easy to get. I'm a big believer of this, and I would be very interested if we can have a discussion in the comments, right? If I'm wrong on this, can anyone convince me that this is a poor opinion to have, okay? I am a big believer that if there is a currency in a game, gold, karma, skill points, dungeon tokens, whatever, there's tons of examples in Guild Wars 2, okay? For a currency to feel fun, you have to have a moment where you don't have enough of that currency, but there's something you're aiming to get. Because then you actually acknowledge that the currency exists, you work to get it, and then you have that fun payoff moment where you're like, yay, I awarded myself with something. And so, to look at some examples in Guild Wars 2, this would mean that the dungeon currencies are probably quite good, because people look at stuff they want, like, their full set of COF armor, but they don't already have the currency, they go off, earn it, come back, they make their purchase, they're happy, they feel rewarded. Karma, on the other hand, is not a good currency. Why? Because people get flooded with tons of karma. Whenever they see a karma vendor, they know they can buy whatever it is instantly, and so they never have that fun payoff. Right, that's my belief about currencies. That is what makes a currency fun. And so, ArenaNet are adding a new currency, a new system to Heart of Thorns, the mastery points. Not talking about actually leveling them up, talking about the mastery points themselves. This currency, these things you find around the world to spend to unlock new tiers. What happens with that? Think about your experience in the beta, guys, because I guarantee it was pretty much exactly the same as mine. You never had that moment. every time you finished training a mastery track, you had the mastery points to spend. Unless it was in the first beta and you just started out and you hadn't done any adventures, which I appreciate can have happened. I think our general experience, though, of running around Beta 2 and most of Beta 1, I always had way too many points. I never had that moment, and it's basically just a non-mechanic. So I think it's too easy, and that's why I think it's too easy. Anyway, there you go, guys. Thank you very much for watching the Q&A. Again, if you've got any questions of your own, please leave them down below. I'll see you again tomorrow for some more video goodness. I hope to catch you guys there. Have a good evening, everyone.